We got this story from Bounding Into Comics. Ooh, I like this one. Disney Insider speculates Bob Chapek was fired because he crossed Disney's HR department that pushed radical woke politics. Disney Insider WDW Pro recently speculated on why he believes the Walt Disney Company axed Chapek just months after renewing his contract through 2025. At the end of June, quote, the Walt Disney Company Board of Directors unanimously voted to extend Chapek's contract as CEO for 3 years. Chairman of the board, Susan Arnold, explained, Disney was dealt a tough hand by the pandemic, yet with Bob at the helm, our businesses from parks to streaming not only weathered the storm, but emerged in a position of strength. They go on to mention that he's the right leader at the right time. However, Sunday, he was giving his walking papers. They issued a press release. Discussing the move to fire Chapek and bring back Iger, Disney Insider appeared on Midnight's Edge and speculated as to the cause of Chapek's firing. When we see a change like this tends to come from the institutional level. This doesn't come from anything that's very small. So what I think probably happened is Bob Chapek, he's got some enemies, and those enemies were primarily coming out of Latondra Newton's department over in HR with the DEI stuff, and that's highly connected with ESG. He continued, and I'm going to bet that as he was looking for places to make cuts in the company, he may have crossed a threshold he wasn't supposed to cross. And in doing so, those big three investors, we're talking about the Vanguards, the BlackRocks, that they may have said to the board, we're ready to begin reassessing our relationship with you. We're not talking about fans who got mad about Star Wars. We're not talking about individual investors who said, I'm going to pull my $10,000 out of Disney. We're talking about people who have the ability to say, I'm pulling my billions and billions and billions that are generated through 401ks and other things that we have associated with you unless you get rid of this guy now. Speculation. But I don't know. I kind of think it makes sense. But I'm not convinced that Chapek was like anti-woke or anything, but I think ESG is a powerful factor. So
I saw people misinterpreting this from both sides. Like first I saw Christopher Rufo saying that Chapek's firing was a rebuke of woke leadership. So we're supposed to buy the narrative that Chapek was anti-woke, but also that he was woke. And then I saw other people complaining about Bob Chapek being anti-LGBT and betraying his LGBT employees. So I don't know what narrative to buy here. I think really it's just that he was a pandemic CEO and now they're getting rid of him for training a replacement.
I was going to say, anytime one of these like companies, whether it's Disney or Nike, has some sort of incident, conservatives like to pounce on it and be like, get woke, go broke. But
exactly.
Like, even under this guy's leadership, like year-to-year revenue was up his first year, I think 6%. Then from 21 to 22 is like 20%. So he was doing a good job financially speaking. And so it makes you wonder how woke the company wants things to go. If this is the guy who even when, Buzz Lightyear's got like a gay kiss and these things are happening, even he's like allowing that to happen. What was he preventing from happening where now HR something, he feels like he stepped on his toes and now they want him out and they're going to bring back Bob.
Now they just put their newest movie, Strange World, I think it's called. They have the first openly gay protagonist for a kid's movie. And I saw people celebrating this. Chapek didn't do anything to stop that.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I assumed they're all woke. You know what I mean?
Yeah, weren't they both pretty woke? And weren't they both kind of instituting these policies?
Get woke,
yes.
Stay broke.
I mean, Iger was always more openly political and openly woke than Chapek, but I think that they might have been planning to fire Chapek.
And at the end of the day,
anyway.
I think it's important to understand the importance of the ESG score, the institutional money, the BlackRock money that is there, that is calling for a lot of these policies to be implemented, no matter what the price it's going to be paid for them. So I don't think these are even company-made decisions. I think these are decisions made even higher up than that, as we're seeing the same kind of cultural push all at once, pushing these larger kind of ideas out there. Now, there's reports that Disney had a $1.5 billion streaming loss last quarter, that their theme parks aren't doing too well with customers being unhappy. They also have ESPN, which people call a sinking network. So a lot of things are happening here. But again, Disney doesn't have the best record, especially with their child actors, especially with them previously thanking concentration camp guards in East Turkestan. So this is a company that again, is major. It's a big powerhouse. It's interesting to see this switch. And I think people are going to attribute it to their own political beliefs rather than actually what's really happening there. You could blame a CEO as you want, but I think it's important to highlight the bigger pressures above the CEO that they need to comply with.
You notice that, they're talking about policies of DEI. And, man, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because you know what, how do you pronounce it? Day? Is that how you pronounce it? in Latin?
I've never said it day.
In Latin?
Day. I've always heard everyone refer to it as DIE for.
No, in
Die.
Latin. It's a Latin word.
Yes.
But
day.
it's diversity, equity, inclusion. What do you mean?
There's a Latin word. Day.
Well,
I think it's pronounced
of
day, right?
God.
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, of God. Right.
Right.
And it's very weird that they use the same word for their non-theistic religion. It is a
I
religion,
never
hands
thought
down.
that was on purpose. Do you think that's on purpose?
I don't know if it's on purpose, but it's a heck of a coincidence.
I think that we are still closer to occult symbolism that we might be comfortable with acknowledging. And it's interesting because the same way that like under a Catholic monarchy, no decision would be made at any institutional level without first thinking, well, how is this going to be viewed in the eyes of God? We do the same thing in this country, except, well, how are black people or how are gay people going to feel about this? So we are literally, as Tim said, worshiping like this
Hold
woke
on.
idea.
I agree and I disagree. I think it's not even about race because Candace Owens, they don't care what she and Kanye have to say or Kyrie Irving. Like all of a sudden their race is erased from the conversation. It really is just, we have a cult, we have things we claim, and if you agree with it, that's what so they're really talking about the religion. Like it makes it more about the religion. How does this impact our religion is basically how they view it.
I think that's true, but I think if Candace Owens were saying things that they agreed with, then she would be, a face on MSNBC or something like that. I think it's because they view her as basically a race traitor that she's now disinvited from the conversation because she's an Uncle Tom or whatever.
But it's I guess this is my point. Candace Owens can have similar opinions to Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro's Jewish and she's black, and it doesn't matter. But then you can have someone who's that MSNBC woman who got fired recently? I can't remember. But it's like the race doesn't matter. It's if do you agree with them or don't you agree with them? If you're a white person and you agree with them, you're in. If you're a black person and you disagree with them, you're out.
Yeah, I think but Candace would be considered like an outlier with what they regard to be like black interest or things like that. I mean, she is a dissenting voice within America and with also the black community. So I think that, even on Twitter, every time she goes viral, all of the replies are from black people calling her a race traitor, calling her Uncle Tom, things like that. And so even regardless of skin color, I mean, she's still serving, I think, what they ultimately want, which is like enforced equality in this country.
And I think, and I agree, I think the reason why they take such offense to Candace specifically is because it does damage their narrative. Seeing people who are just like, hey, I don't agree with your ideas and my race isn't a component, then they're like, no, that can't be allowed. Like we can't have people who say those things. So you're internalizing white supremacy.
I think there's more room for dissent, though, if you're not white. Because I don't think Kanye would have gotten away with what he's said to the extreme that he has if he were white.
I agree that, like...
And Dave Chappelle, too, for that monologue he did on SNL.
Right. If you are a marginalized person, you are allowed to wield the sword more so than if you're a white person. So you can be a somewhat dissenting voice. If you agree with the cult and challenge it in a way like, actually, you're being a bigot, then they'll be, they'll defer, right? So obviously there's like a weird identitarian hierarchy to what these people believe. Anyway, the reason I brought this up, not to just, to go back to what I was saying is, they call it God. Whether intentionally or not, DEI means God. Of God. That's creepy to me.
Yeah, apparently pronounced Dei, by the way.
Dei, there you go. See, I knew I wasn't getting it right because I don't speak Latin or anything like that.
I think it's both right.
Yeah, both right.
Well, Elon Musk tweeted Vox Populi, Vox Dei, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know what that means. I mean, simply put, because I played Bioshock Infinite. You played that, right?
I owned a copy, yeah.
Oh, okay, so the Vox Populi, I think, the voice of the people. And then and I know what Dei means, or Dei, whatever. And so I saw what he said. I understood the gist. Voice of the people is the voice of God, or however you wanted to explain it. And then I was like, that's very funny, touche, Elon Musk. And then I looked it up, and when I tried searching for it, Latin doesn't come up. Wokeness comes up. Oh. When you search for Dei, when you search, what comes up is not God or Latin. What comes up is all of these websites about equity and wokeness and all the other creepy stuff. It's a church.
University. Yeah.
Equity is particularly scary because it's harder to define that than equality. I mean, if it's equality, okay, everyone should be equal. Equity implies this like vague narrative of who has had injustice done to them, and they define the narrative. So that is, of course, going to be anybody who isn't a straight white male. And so because of that, they have this like Trojan horse that's painted in the blood of like black slaves. And in that, they're going to contain all of this stuff that's going to disenfranchise white people, straight people, normal people from being able to access these positions in favor of what they want, which is the DEI stuff, which of course is never going to be, you're never going to see like a board of like a bunch of, Latino people, and they're going to be like, you need more white people. It's always diversity being defined as less white people, more people of color, which is the way that they define it, because then you have all non-white people versus white people, people of color. And it's like, well, I mean, frankly, white people, we have all sorts of different eye colors, different hair colors, things like that.
Luke's not white.
You're not?
Did you see? Exactly. He didn't even know.
Exactly. You don't recognize my people's struggles. I come from the Slavic people that been through a lot of struggles. Like, my family's been through some crazy stuff. And if we're going to be going through...
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. What's your ethnic background?
Well, so I'm Irish, and some people even say that Irish aren't white. So maybe I can...
But are you just Irish?
Irish and French, I think.
Okay, so you're white. Yeah. Luke is Polish. So that makes him a person of color. But sorry, Luke.
But the horrible thing, don't interrupt me. All right.
Let marginalized voices speak.
No. But if we were truly going to go through, okay, your people were oppressed. Okay, there's a long history. There's a lot of cultures. There's a lot of people who were oppressed, who dealt with slavery, who dealt with oppression, whether by the Russians or the fascists or whatever it may be. My family went through all of that. But at the same time, it's kind of disingenuous to tell to people, the more of a victim you are, the better you are. The better you are in our system. And I think that right there is not only promoting victim mentality, but also making, cheapens things, and it disincentivizes people from actually taking grips of control of their life and saying, hey, I'm in charge of this. I'm not a victim. I set my own destiny here. And that works in direct parallel against it, which is absolutely disingenuous and horrible, I think, and has a very negative effect on the psyche of a lot of these people and individuals.
Let me tell you what else I find very strange, because everybody knows what equity means, right? Mm-hmm. Equity means the value of shares issued by a company, and more. He owns 62% of the group's equity. It means the value of a mortgaged property after deduction or of charges against it. Mm-hmm. It references a trade union, an equity card or whatever. And then on Google it says the quality of being fair and impartial. Interesting. In Latin, it comes from equus, equitas, and equite, and then equity. And I think it's pretty interesting that the colloquial understanding of the word was never fairness. We always use equity, at least in my life, to refer to your value. So when you'd say something like, oh, I have $100,000 equity in my home or whatever, you're specifically referring to what is the intrinsic value of what you have or something like that. There's something creepy about them coming out and using this terminology, the value of shares issued in a company, stakeholder capitalism and things like that, and then referring to how they need equity. It sounds like they're trying to define what value do you bring to this system. Now, I don't know, perhaps it's a stretch, but when we're at a point in history where you have the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum coming out and outright saying stuff about overpopulation for years, and then they're asking you about how we can push for equity, it sounds like, to me, they're arguing, can we push for a system where people have a higher value than liability?
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is crazy, especially seeing the NHL say that there's too many white people in their league.
Wait, I said that?
Yeah, and that they're having specific outreach programs that are going to make it more equitable, that are going to make NHL teams more diverse. So we don't see that in the NBA. I mean, if we're going to be doing that with the NHL, are we going to be doing that with the NBA, just to be fair here? And obviously, that's not going to happen here. But when you have a society based on artificial things and allegiance to the cult rather than actual merit, you're going to have a society that fails. This is why a lot of people believe communism failed, mainly because it wasn't the best person for the job. It wasn't the hardest working person for the job. It was, oh, you have the perfect allegiance. You have the perfect family lineage. You have the person who we're close with and friends with who's going to be in these positions of power because you're close to us, because you bow down, because you respect authority. That's not a society that is actually progressive. That's a society that is degressive and overall hurts humanity.
Getting people to give their perfect allegiance to a government requires taking their religion away from them. That's reeling it back to religion. They
want to make the state your religion. They want to make obedience to the cult your religion, rather than, of course, an actual religion based
Or maybe
in
just
God. And
worshiping yourself.
that also, too, I think is another important element. Where
That's
a lot
what
of people-
representation is all about. It's just like I need to see myself all the time. Even when I'm not looking in a mirror, I need to see myself in media.
Yeah. And it's a problem if you see color, and if it's a problem if you don't see color, which again is just such a confusing political social landscape that we're supposed to be living in, that a lot of people are living in fear. A lot of people are uncomfortable. And when it comes to humor, that softens a lot of this kind of uncomfortability. That is banned. That is censored. That is being attacked. And we see Dave Chappelle being, called anti-Semitic, which is, I think, absolutely absurd and crazy when his comments were hitting at everyone and making people laugh about something that people are taking way too seriously and creating more of a divide in our society, which I think is being done deliberately by central controllers, because the more that we could fight each other, the less we're actually looking at the true oppressors, the true multinational corporations, the true big bankers, the true people in power that are screwing us over and creating this larger economic havoc that we're having to deal with and really screwing everyone over.
I don't know if it's that. I think it's probably more that conflict exists naturally. I think people are very tribalistic, and I think that they do have an incentive to kind of stoke the flames of that. But this is sort of like, I think, the record of history. And it is interesting how any identity, like we talked about religion, that you have that would separate you from the state, whether it's a religious identity, a cultural identity, national identity, anything like that, has been dissuaded and basically erased. You're not allowed to have that. And so when you're looking for an identity now in this country, you have like the state-approved identities. You can be like gay, for example. And think about, like, since the beginning of time, humans have made flags to define themselves. And now we have the pride flag, and then we have all the other flags like that. That is just so telling to where young people are going nowadays, to where they want to feel like they can be proud of their identity, be proud of something. And so they have to wave the pride flag, which now, as I'm sure we'll get into on the national stage, is even more representative of American values and American power than the actual American flag. Because when you see the American flag now flying at embassies in Saudi Arabia or whatever, you don't think of white picket fences and apple pie. You think of gay people. You think of things like that, because that is what America wants to promote on the world stage.
Oh, I disagree. I think of soldiers, if Saudi Arabia specifically, I think of oil. U.S. soldiers guarding oil fields and poppy fields in Afghanistan.
I think of Yemen and the humanitarian crisis that's still continuing right there. That's causing millions of people to die.
But the reason I bring that up is because U.S. embassies were flying the pride flag.
Yes.
And so, they're just outright, not in Saudi Arabia, obviously. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.